Okay, welcome to this very special open classroom with the Media and Palestine course. We're very happy to welcome an LAU alumni to this class. Welcome back to LAU, Dana Abbas.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. So basically, we've invited Dana here today to present research that she completed after her studies at LAU. She did study political science at LAU, and afterwards, she joined me on a research project for a paper that's currently under peer review. So we were not able to circulate the paper, although the people in the in-person class, I do have a version of it on Blackboard for you that you're not allowed to distribute because it is under peer review. But you can see the full research project that will be presented today. But this is a chance for students, including our online participants, to learn how to use the anti-Palestinian media framework to study bias in outputs from ChatGPT. So this research project that Dana and I and our colleague here at LAU, Dr. Yegij, conducted together was actually started in the Media and Palestine class in fall 2023, before the current genocide. And we did this research project with students, much like students in the in-person class will be invited to join a research project, not invited, instructed and assessed based on your research assistants in testing and analyzing outputs from different chatbots. And we will start that assignment next week in class. So it's very important to be in class on time starting next week so that we can continue this research project. And we will be, for the current project, testing 10 different platforms, including the latest version of ChatGPT. So before Dana begins, I want to acknowledge that this research paper is another example of work conducted during genocide. Both motivated our work because no one has published research like this, and because the current genocide is an AI-assisted genocide. And we as researchers and scholars and students of media need to be studying and learning more about how these AI platforms are rooted in the current genocide, and to learn how to spot anti-Palestinian media bias in AI-generated outputs. So again, I'd like to welcome Dana to this class. I want to remind the online audience that we do have a live chat on for the YouTube stream. So if you're joining us on the YouTube stream, you can always post your question on the live chat, and we'll do our best to try to accommodate questions during the stream. But otherwise, every student in this class will be taking notes to prepare a question to ask you. Obviously, you won't be able to hear from all the students, but I will curate the questions. You'll get to hear from them afterwards. And I have already promised the students that you have 2 outputs from ChatGPT 3.5 to analyze, one in English and one in Arabic. So 2 students will have a chance to practice analyzing these with Dana. So Dana, again, welcome back to LAU. We're going to pass the microphone to you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for coming. I know the in-person classroom had no choice, but still thank you. So today we're presenting the work that Dr. Gretchen, Dr. Danielle, and I co-authored, titled The Political Economy of AI, a Content Analysis of ChatGPT.
I think that we just lost you. Oh, Dana, we lost you for a second, but now you're back, so I appreciate you.
Can you still see my screen? Yeah.
Okay, just start over because we got the spinning wheel of death as soon as you started speaking, okay? So I'm going to pass the microphone again to you, and hopefully that won't happen again.
Okay, so hi, thank you for coming again. Today we're presenting the work that I've co-authored with Dr. Gretchen and Dr. Danielle. And as part of your module on critical media literacy, you've been studying anti-Palestinian media bias. So this week, I'm going to walk you through our article on anti-Palestinian media bias in ChatGPT output and other generative AI models. So literally walking you through this paper. So this includes the research questions, our literature review, methods, whatever. And we finally have the exercises at the end, but I wouldn't worry about that just now. So the goal of our research is to understand how generative AI platforms like ChatGPT could be biased towards Palestinians. And we also wanted to know if ChatGPT could produce different biases in English and in Arabic. There's plenty of research suggesting that generative AI models can produce prejudiced work, but the research concerning anti-Palestinian media bias is limited. Understanding how AI can be biased towards Palestinians is incredibly important, considering that OpenAI had updated its policies to permit national security uses for its partnerships with the US government and its allies. And this includes the occupation, whose military usage of OpenAI skyrocketed after October 7. So, to understand this, and to answer this research question, and to understand how this can impact anti Palestinian media bias produced in the outputs by ChatGPT, we need to look at three factors, which are media imperialism, the political economy of AI, and digital Orientalism. So let's start with media imperialism. So understanding bias in AI towards Palestinians or against Palestinians does not include just learning how the programming works or what a large language model does, but also understanding how social structures and ideologies can shape the internet and other digital communication technologies. So we define media imperialism as the ability of powerful states to manipulate media to dominate another nation or a group. So this is done both materially and ideologically. So the material support of media imperialism is can be found in this example in 1948 during the Nakba, when the settler colony stole all the media infrastructure and data gathered by the British occupation about Palestinians, so demographic counts, land surveys, population counts. And this capturing of data was meant to uphold settler colonialism. And this material imperialism the material support of media imperialism that we're talking about isn't just colonizers taking to uplift themselves, but also to oppress indigenous people like Palestinians. So in the 90s, for example, or from the Nakba to the 90s, excuse me, Zionists had cut off media for Palestinians, and it had created what we know as a communication vacuum. And it caused the de-development of Palestinian media economy. So these techniques are like what we're seeing in the genocide in Gaza today, where journalists are being, their martyrdom is being used to prevent news of Israeli war crimes reaching the rest of the world. And it's also similar to the communication outages we've been seeing when the internet's been cut off of Gaza all throughout this 2-year genocide. So the other way that media imperialism can be supported is through ideological support. And an example of this ideological support for the uplifting of the settler colony is found here on the front page of the New York Herald, where news of the British colonizing Palestine is being framed as the British rescuing Jerusalem after 600 years of Muslim rule. So we have to ask ourselves, how is this different from headlines that favor the occupation today? And the answer is that it's not. So discussions of Israel's AI usage in academia and grey literature and the news is currently all about its AI-assisted genocide, where it basically uses AI models like Gospel, Lavender AI, or Where's Daddy to automate the murder of Palestinians. And this is something that the occupation has disclosed on its own. But it's also worth noting that the usage of AI inside the occupied territories is not just limited to its military, but it's used to uphold the occupation of Palestinians internally. So what we think of first when we think of AI and the occupation is we think of how it's used in the military. We think of the Lavender AI, Gospel AI, whatever. But you also think of technology like Red Wolf and Blue Wolf, which are used to uphold the occupation internally and maintain apartheid for Palestinians. Still, we see this across different sectors in the occupation. So we just spoke about the military, but there's also the security technology industry or the tech industry. And the settler colony likes to brand itself as a tech startup nation. But what is not said is that this AI, like I just mentioned, is used to uphold the apartheid regime found internally for Palestinians. So this includes the cyber surveillance and data collection of Palestinian information is used to uphold the digital occupation of Palestinians as well as the literal occupation. And this example is very reminiscent of how Zionist forces stole demographics, population counts, and all this information from the British about Palestinians. So The Israeli technology capitalizes off the military occupation of Palestine. So, for example, Elbit, which is an Israeli tech company, um, they have a $145 million deal to construct a virtual wall at the border between Arizona and Mexico, or they had in 2021. And this technology was first tested on Palestinians in the West Bank. And this is a continuous cycle that you see with multiple companies, with multiple investors in the West Bank and Gaza repeatedly, because it's a very profitable collaboration, which also includes Israeli universities. So these tech companies, these security firms, as well as the occupation forces themselves, will collaborate in research for the development of AI tools, which all end up serving the Israeli military, which therefore oppresses Palestinians. So when we're taking a look at the political economy of AI in occupied Palestine, we're seeing the exchange of communication technologies and human resources between these three sectors to maintain Israel's military-industrial communications complex, or in other words, to continue occupying Palestine. So the third thing we need to know to answer our question, to answer our research question, or to motivate our research question, is the digital divide that we have, or digital Orientalism. So, like we mentioned earlier, the answers generated by ChatGPT, these outputs are not created in a vacuum, but they're created from large data sets scraped off the internet to train large language models like ChatGPT. So we just said that understanding anti-Palestinian bias in AI isn't just about programming, it's understanding how social structures or ideologies can shape the internet. So if we take a look at Arab media and the Arabic-speaking part of the world, we did not have the same media and communication access or infrastructures as in comparison to Europe, for example, because we had a lot going on in this time period. So colonization, wars, the Lebanese civil war was 20 something years. This kind of prevents us from reaching the same milestones technologically or in terms of communication tech as the West. And this is also manifested in the content we find online in Arabic or about Arabic even. So less than 1.1% of content online is in Arabic, and less than 0.2% of that is made in the Arab region. So something that we had found when prompting ChatGPT to answer our questions, that we found that there was not enough Arabic data sets used for developing generative AI. And on the other hand, in the Western world, we know that offline anti-Palestinian media bias from the West has carried into the internet usage, to the internet we all use because of algorithms and because of AI-generated content. And we also know that anti-Palestinian media bias does exist online and what ways it manifests in. And we're going to put a pin on that, and we're going to get to that in a second. But returning back to what we did in fall 2023 with that previous iteration of the Media and Palestine class, we had 17 students who were trained, who were given a module on media bias and analysis, much like you. And they had completed exercises on analyzing anti-Palestinian media bias in news headlines. And they were also given a workshop and instructions on how to prompt ChatGPT effectively. Prompting ChatGPT was also done with in relevance to our research questions and the theoretical framework. So it was a systematic way. And I have an example of that on the slide here of the tips we gave students to effectively prompt ChatGPT. So students prompted ChatGPT twice, once in English and once in Arabic. And then we had some students who couldn't speak Arabic or were not as proficient in Arabic could write their answers in English, and then we manually translated that. So the theoretical framework that we had used to guide students into prompting ChatGPT with these key points in mind was from Gretchen's work and Daniel's work on copy editing Palestine. So it was an anti-Palestinian media bias framework. And this paper describes how anti-Palestinian bias and racism was implemented into style and editorial guides for media practitioners on how to convey information in a neutral and an objective way. And the authors of the paper then describe the different categories or subgroups of anti-Palestinian media bias. So they're in front of you, but we're gonna go over them very quickly. So one way of doing this is through word choices. So when you use words such as like Palestine, Israel, or you say conflict, any word to say occupation or settler colony and such. Or if you use Orientalist discourses, such as saying, for example, Palestinians engage in terrorism when they have a right to lawfully resist or a right to self-determination. There's also the usage of Israeli-centric frames, which is centering things like Israel has the right to defend itself and other like national security discourses, or Israel says, Israel asserts, Israel does, etc. We also have missing context. This one can seem kind of vague, but we're taking a look at what is not said. So, for example, if you prompt ChatGPT a question about the Nakba, and then it tells you, well, the Nakba was a complex historical event, it's avoiding telling you that there was genocide, there was ethnic cleansing, land theft, occupation, colonialism. So that's an example of missing context. You also have Nakba denial, so denying that the settler colony was formed through genocide and colonialism, as opposed to anything else. And there's also finally erasing refugees, which is ignoring that Palestinians are the world's oldest and largest refugee population. And yeah, so those are the categories that we had used in this paper, and they're going to come up again. So we're going to go straight to our findings now. So this was a frequency analysis of what words showed up the most. So this is our quantitative findings. And here our main finding from the frequency analysis of the words Palestine, Palestinian, Israel, Israeli, is that we see, of course, that Israel and Israeli are a bit overrepresented. But the main finding here is that Palestinians is overused in comparison to Palestine. So Palestine is only mentioned 20 times in almost 9,000 words in English and 15 times in 5,000 words in Arabic. There's also an implication here that Palestinians are stateless, or there's a lack of state, because how could there be so many Palestinians and yet no Palestine? So it fails to acknowledge that Palestinians are indigenous to this land. And this is also reaffirmed with terms describing colonial fascism in the next slide, with the frequency analysis of words representing settler colonial violence. So, for example, the words describing the violence that made many Palestinians stateless or turned them into refugees are missing. So not only is this denying the Nakba, because Nakba is only mentioned 14 times in English in terms of just frequencies of them occurring across all the samples, and 3 times in Arabic, but you also have the word genocide not being used, expelled not being used, not expelled. That's not the word, expulsion is the word, sorry. Or colonialism is not used entirely in English. Yeah, so not only is this removing the historical context, it's denying the Nakba, but it's also erasing refugees. And this is also reaffirmed through faulty word choices, which center Israeli frames, such as equating like with the words, with the term both sides being used 16 times, it's equating a colonizer and a colonized group. You also have words like conflict or complex, essential, war. All of these words are used more than occupation and occupied, both in English and in Arabic. As for our qualitative finds, as far as Orientalist discourse goes, we found that both the English and the Arabic sample engaged in Orientalist discourses. For example, the word terrorism was used to describe Palestinian actions in both languages. In the Arabic sample, though, they did use terrorism to describe Israeli actions, but that did engage in both sides engaged in terrorist activities, which is also still a form of anti-Palestinian racism or media bias. We also found that readers were explicitly warned not to be critical of Israel. So in the Arabic sample, it essentially told the reader to not generalize the actions of a few individuals to the entirety of the IOF. Or the English one is also really rich. The idea that instances of violence against Palestinians during the Nakba, so a genocide, were not representative of all Zionists, which is just not true. We also are taking a look at Israeli-centric frames. So what I just mentioned earlier, Israel asserts, Israel argues, were both found in the English and Arabic sample. And we also found a lot of the national security discourse being reproduced. So Israel needs to defend itself from these constant rocket attacks, or the idea that Palestinian militants are sparking tensions between both sides. So lots to unpack here. We also have missing context, Nakba denial, and raising refugees. So there's a couple examples here. So for example, there was no discussion of Zionism or colonialism, and the outputs that we were seeing went out of their way to excuse Israeli war crimes. So for example, I said for example a bunch. But in the West, in any examples of the West Bank or any outputs about the West Bank, ChatGPT would go out of its way to say things that these settlements were considered illegal or widely criticized as illegal, deemed illegal. And there was only one point where it said that the settlements were explicitly illegal according to the Geneva Conventions. The sample also failed to acknowledge Palestinians as indigenous. So again, it said that the Nakba was complex. It had a lot of political, territorial, and nationalistic elements, which is saying nothing. And there was also the fact that the right of return was only mentioned once, which is disappointing because it's pure Nakba denial, and it's also it's the whole point of wanting a free Palestine is so that the indigenous people could return to their homes. So that was also a bit rough to read. Yeah, so this study, just in general, to conclude, provides evidence for a need for critical AI literacy studies and research-based teaching that allows students to generate and analyze AI content in the classroom. So the theorization of the political economy of AI in occupied Palestine in this article, it informs a framework of critical media education that is needed and recognizes that ChatGPT is a bullshitter, which is an academic term, by the way. It also places AI within the studies of media imperialism and digital divides and digital orientalism, which we found was not there prior to the creation of this article. We also saw that the study helped students who were analyzing ChatGPT content. It helped them not only detect anti-Palestinian media bias, but it also exposed it exposed the students about the dangers of uncritical AI use. We had a lot of students who were saying they use ChatGPT as their personal diary or therapist, which I do not advise. Most importantly, I think having this critical political economy lens emboldens users, students who are using this to ask questions such as who's benefiting from these platforms. OpenAI claims that the creation of ChatGPT was meant to benefit all of humanity, but I don't think we argue that that is not what they're actually doing with their actions. And by contrast, we also see a lot of people who work in the AI space, Palestinians work in the AI space, work towards unbiasing AI through centering Palestinian life and the lives of all marginalized people so that it can make something that is unbiased and more ethical. There's obviously, a whole conversation about how this could happen, but that's where we end off with. So we have the exercises now, but I think maybe you'd like a moment to pause. Maybe, Gretchen, you would want to say something? I've kind of been talking to myself, and I'm kind of convinced I left the classroom now.
It's fine. You're here. I just, I put you.
Oh,
okay?
God, I was panicking. I was like, where are you people?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, so just while I'm speaking, I have to mute you in order to make a clean archive of our time together. This is why we joined the classroom a little bit late, in case anybody not in the room was wondering. We were having some technical issues with HDMI cables, which is just silly. Anyway, the point is that I have to have you on mute when we're talking in the classroom, and vice versa. I need to mute when this.
I'm just so glad I wasn't talking to myself for 20 minutes.
I can't hear what you're saying. Hold on just a second. What did you want to say, Dana?
Oh, no, I was just saying I'm so glad I wasn't talking to myself for 20 minutes, because that was a horrendous 1 minute of me thinking.
Nah, it was fine. Okay, so one thing I'm going to ask before we do the knowledge test is to go back to the screen where the anti-Palestinian media bias framework from Copy Editing Palestine is located. And I want to remind our online listeners, you can post your questions in the live chat. We have it open in front of us. I posted the link to the Copy Editing Palestine paper that Dana mentioned that this framework comes from. So I want all students to write down language. Here, I'll make it bigger for you. Language. Right. Language. Right. Orientalist discourses. Right. Israeli-centric frames. Are you okay, Aya? Okay, you catching up? Okay. Right. Missing context. It's on the screen in front of you. Okay. Language, Orientalist discourses, Israeli-centric frames, missing context, Nakba denial, and erasing refugees. Okay. This is the framework that we will be using when we start our next research project of 10 different chatbots. So today you're going to practice with this. So you need to understand this. What I recommend for your questions, and you'll have a second now to write your question very clearly now in front of you. Ask Dana about this framework. Ask about the method. Ask about the qualitative or the quantitative results. Dana, some students in the class felt you went a little bit fast. It's good feedback. She wants to hear feedback. And so I think that they might ask you some things that you felt like you explained in the presentation, but for some of the students in the classroom, it went by a little bit fast. So they might just ask you to repeat and clearly explain something that maybe you feel like you already explained. Okay. So I'm going to ask if Rasha is ready with a question for Dana. No? Sareen, you're ready? I'll call you up. Just wait in. We're going to try to, the microphones don't need to be on right now. What? Oh, it says erasing refugees. Okay. Anybody have any questions about what's on the screen? You can also ask Dana, but can you see the terms? The reason I want to give you these terms is she's going to ask you to analyze something later, and you're going to have to practice analyzing with these terms. So Rasha, given you're a migration student, we're going to put you in the hot seat for the first text analysis, or maybe the second one. We'll ask you to analyze something. Diana, did you ask a question on the live broadcast yet? Yes. You did? Okay, maybe we'll make you analyze something too. Okay. I didn't ask you. Sareen, please come up. Don't forget that when you come up and you're going to ask your question, you're also going to introduce yourself, say your major, and then you're going to ask your question. And I'm going to kind of be leaning over you so that I can control the mute features and these kinds of things, okay? But first, I'm going to present Sareen. Well, Sareen's going to present herself.
All right.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Can't hear you. It's okay. We know you said hi. So please introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Sireen Fathallah. I'm a communication major. And I wanted to ask you, a few days ago, we had a live campaign on campus for Palestine. And me and my colleague Batul were tackling terrorism and the perfect victim that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Accusing Palestinians of being terrorists and
Yeah.
dehumanizing them. So I had many questions about this, and I did not know what to answer. The students asked me, what is the solution for this issue? And we all know that Western media, Western countries, the powerful countries, pro-Israeli countries, they have control over the media, and not just the media. They have control over everything. So what do you think can be a solution for this issue, this ongoing issue?
Okay. Am I unmuted? Just so I know. I think I am. Okay, I'm assuming I'm unmuted and I'm just gonna talk. I'm sorry if your answer gets sent to the void. I think part of the struggle to combat this anti-Palestinian racism or media bias is part of the struggle is that you're going to have a lot of people be repeating these like very racist talking points back at you, or these not so, let's say, grounded in reality talking points at you Because the reality is Palestinians do have a right to lawful resistance. For it to be called terrorism is essentially people repeating Israeli propaganda points back at you. The way I think of it is, or at least the way I feel like I'm contributing is through knowledge production. So the fact that you're in this class, the fact that you're reading what you're reading and you're doing what you're doing, having this knowledge, I think, is key. Saying, for example, responding to such concerns of like, well, Palestinian resistance is terrorism, is responding back with the right points of, well, who's saying they're terrorists? Why are they saying they're terrorists? Just really questioning the basis of those points. Or at least that's how I understood your question. I'm not sure if I did.
Okay, Dana, I'm going to join in the box with Sareen, so you have to scoot over a little bit. So I came back. So I wanted to
if you're hearing me.
you. Sorry, Dana, did you say something? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying I'm just not sure what's going on because I'm just relying on hearing alone. So if I'm pausing or I'm asking too many things, just excuse me.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. We can hear you perfectly. Okay. When you talk, the only time that we can't hear you is when I have the audio muted in the room, but the internet can still hear you. Okay. So if I'm saying I can't hear you, it's because I have you muted locally in the room, but the internet can. So just to build on Sadine's question and your answer, I do 100% agree. It's about knowledge. And I do think that the media in particular and media content producers, so not just traditional journalists, anyone who is sharing content online, right? Because people who share content, they're also broadcasting media in a non-traditional sense. But also people who are creating content and circulating it online. And even in this class, there were some students who clipped content to include in their booth activities that Sadine was mentioning on Monday. And even some of that clipped content had mistakes in it, historical mistakes. Some of the content visually put up in the booth reproduced words that are Zionist words, like words conflict, right? So these terms, we have to remember that when they come up, we need to recognize that using the word conflict to describe a genocide or a war is a both-sidedism, is an Israeli talking point. It's an Israeli-centric frame that pits the occupier as equal to the occupied. And that is a problem. And we know that with colonial violence, the colonizer initiates violence. We know that with refugees, they have a right under international law to return. Even if you don't remember the name of the law, it is still good to know, hey, the right of return is an internationally protected right for all refugees, and especially for Palestinians enshrined by United Nations declarations. Remember the United Nations declarations and resolutions? So my point is, yes, knowledge needs to be built, but also knowledge needs to be activated in the production and circulation of media. And that puts some responsibility on journalists, some responsibility on media makers, and people who share content as well. You need to be very careful with the content you share. Otherwise, you might be sharing an Israeli talking point. You might be sharing an Orientalist discourse, especially if you see reference to the word terrorism to a Palestinian person. That is an Orientalist discourse because it frames the Palestinian as the perpetrator of violence against the occupier or the colonizer. And again, blaming the victim is Orientalist discourse, as we've learned from week 1 in this class with Edward Said. So thank you for your answer, Dana. Thank you for your question, Sareen. Who would like to ask the next question? Diana? Come on up. Maybe I'll let you analyze later, okay? You analyze? You asked the question. Anyway, okay. So I'll let Diana introduce herself and ask the question, okay?
Hi, my name is Diana and I'm a strategy communication major. So my question was, when we see that the Israelis, like when asking about the Palestine war by the Israelis and the occupation, that they're denying the Nakba, they're missing the context, they're using specific language. Do you think by doing that they're slowly trying to erase all of the history? Because now when you research, most people are using AI, so they won't really get any real historical fact about what was happening at the time. So it's like a plan, not for now, but more for the future, that you're slowly erasing the history. And so you don't have like a, not factory, like evidence of what happened before in a way.
Okay. I think you're spot on. I do think that a lot of these propagandists do deny these things or claim that the Nakba didn't happen, the Nakba happened differently. They'll use all these kinds of points, like Palestinians stole their land, to deflect from Israeli war crimes and from the fact that this is an ongoing colonization process. You're absolutely right. I do think this is intentional. Dr. Gretchen shared with me once this copy editing guide that was spread by, I forgot who in relation to the occupation, that had all these kinds of things of how to deflect points that were critical of the occupation. So as far as I know, and I think Dr. Gretchen can fill you in with the damn handbook that I can't remember, all of these things are written down. For example, I remember reading that the usage of the word, for example, conflict was encouraged. The usage of Israeli-centric framework was encouraged. In one way or another, Orientalist discourses do seep their way into this. It is absolutely intentional. Yeah.
I'm going to scoot in again and just remind you of that guide was prepared by UN Watch about the current genocide. So UN Watch is a Zionist organization that watches the UN. And because of all the genocide proceedings that were initiated after South Africa presented its file at the criminal court, UN Watch issued a guide to talking points concerning the current genocide, although they don't use the word genocide, they say conflict. And yeah, you can see how Zionists weaponize words. And this is in addition to other guides that have been leaked. So one of the guides that we mentioned, even here, you see Luntz, 2009 on the slide. That refers to, I think his name is Peter Luntz. He's a PR specialist from America who was hired by a Zionist organization named the Israel Project to write a dictionary, a global language dictionary for Zionists of what words to use. And so one of the things that we're quoting here is terror, not territory. This was Luntz's advice to Zionists. If you can keep the conversation focused on terrorism, you win Americans. And he had polls to prove it, because that's what they do in PR. They do polls, public polls, to back up their advice and say, hey, look, we're right. And they had polls that proved that as soon as the word territory was used, your support for Israel went down. So even something like the occupied Palestinian territories, which is the official term recognized by the United Nations for the West Bank and Gaza, in Zionist discourse, it's referred to as West Bank and Gaza Strip. Why? Because the minute you say territory, you make the issue about the land. And so they actually change the name. And even if it's coming from the AP or Reuters and it says occupied Palestinian territories, Zionist newspapers or newspapers that are sympathetic to the Zionist narrative will actually change those words from occupied Palestinian territories to West Bank or Gaza Strip, because they also don't want to print the word territory. So this language in and of itself is weaponized by Zionists. And our ability to spot that language being weaponized is our ability to not have it come into our feeds and not have it come into our minds. You want to ask a follow-up question, Celine? Okay, we have a guest here now, so we need to direct questions to her, to both of you. Okay, let's go to Dana for her question, because we're going to try to pass the microphone to many students. See, Dana, so many students want to talk to you, and Celine doesn't want to stop talking to you. But we're going to pass the microphone to Dana, who can introduce herself and pose her question. And then we're going to move to analysis. And maybe, Celine, I'll get you to come sit in the hot seat for analysis. And then you can ask your follow-up question. And then, Rasha, I saw you had your hand up too. we're going to get you to sit in the hot seat for analysis, and you can ask your question at the same time. Just because we don't want to run out of time, we want to get to the activity part as well. So I'll pass the microphone to Dana, and I'll get out of the way so she can introduce herself.
Okay, hi, I am Dana, a third-year journalism student. So regarding the style guides, you know that style guides, it's like a guide, specific language that should be used to achieve neutrality, but in fact, we are not achieving neutrality because how it's being used now. So I want to ask you about the role of repetition, the importance of the repetition. By repeating the same language and the same words on media and journalism, or by feeding ChatGPT and the AI, how it's aiming to first of all not to define Palestinians, by not defining the refugees, by not accepting the fact that they have the right to return to their lands, and by not defining Nakba and deleting most of the history or all of the history in Palestine.
Okay. Do you think you could repeat again what you wanted to answer?
Just repeat your specific question.
Okay, so my question is the role of repetition.
Repetition. Okay. Sorry, I just locked in. I think you're onto something when it comes to the role of repetition. In research, at least in terms of this paper, when we did the frequency analysis, we were able to tell a lot. Just by this paper alone, for example, the example I gave earlier in the presentation, when the usage of Palestinian is 192 times across 9,000 words, but Palestine is only mentioned 20 times, you can very easily imply that Palestinians are stateless, non-indigenous, and so on. So I think repetition plays a very important role, at least in terms of this paper, and in terms of media in general. I would return back to what Dr. Gretchen was saying. Where if you are aware of the terms that you should be avoiding and you are using the terms that you should be using to accurately describe what is happening in occupied Palestine right now, you are able to keep your feeds away. You are able to keep your feeds, social media feeds, clean from Zionist narratives. So yeah.
I'm back in the screen. Okay, can you go to the frequency analysis? Because I think Dana raises a really important point about repetition. Remember, if it's repeated again and again, it becomes reality. So it becomes normalized. So we need to disrupt that repetition as much as possible. And with ChatGPT outputs, be careful what you're receiving from ChatGPT. We asked an equal number of questions about Israel and about Palestine across the 17 questions. It was 5 and 5, if I recall, from the research project. So 5 of the prompts we entered specifically said Palestine or Palestinian, and 5 of the prompts also specifically said something about Israel or Israelis. And regardless of that equal number of instances in the prompts, we had a different number of instances in the quantitative results, as she showed you. More references to Israel in the English and Arabic data over Palestine. Go to the next slide, please. So this one is the opposite of repetition. It's about erasure. And this is where we see Indigenous people erased, because not once in 10,000 words in English did ChatGPT manage to produce the word colonial, colonialism, colonization. No instance of that word occurred. We are dealing with a society that was indigenous, that was there, that was displaced through genocide and ethnic cleansing since 1947. And not once did ChatGPT generate the word colonialism, colonization, or colonial. Only once in Arabic was colonization mentioned. In Arabic, we had nearly 6,000 words, but yet only once. Now, people would assume, oh, ChatGPT is plugged into Arabic, it has Arabic newspapers, it's going to know more about Palestine, let me talk to ChatGPT in Arabic. This shows you that ChatGPT in Arabic doesn't have as much data, as Dana said. There's a disparity due to digital divides, due to digital archives, differently archiving content in English versus Arabic. There's a lack of content that gets digitized in Arabic. In fact, archives are attacked. As Dana said, since 1948, Israelis have been attacking media and archives of Palestinians. Even here in Beirut, the Palestinian Liberation Organization's archives were attacked and destroyed. So this digital divide doesn't just happen to us. It is a weaponized digital divide. It is created through war, and it's actually weaponized today with these chatbots further reproducing it. So thank you for that question, Dana. We're gonna do questions, but also analysis. So maybe you can take us to the first exercise. Sareen,
All right.
come and ask me your question. You're gonna ask the question. Yalla. So Sareen's gonna come ask her very important burning question, and she will also do an analysis of the first exercise, the first prompt you selected for us, okay? Or the first answer based on this prompt. So I'll let Sareen ask her question, and then we'll get to her analysis.
Okay, so you mentioned about word erasure and censorship and not being able to نوصل the message. So that's what my question was. What is the solution? Okay, we are going to. Our message is not passing to the people that need knowledge. The people that are brainwashed are not getting the message that we want to direct to them because of censorship and word erasure. And so who is going to fix the problem of ChatGPT being biased, or Instagram being owned by imperialist cities?
Okay.
Fix this. And how?
I mean, I think I'm of the same wavelength of you. I have the same opinion. I think as far as how would all of this happen, I'm not entirely sure how to answer that. But what I do know, as in my individual contribution, how I feel better, or like the small ways that we can resist day to day. For me, as a researcher, it's knowledge production. So the fact that we started talking about this, this research was produced, more research is being produced with different generative AI models. Now we know. And then we take it from there. There are also a lot of other organizations, Palestinian human rights organizations like Hamle, for example, who talk about how Meta censors Palestinians. They bring these issues to light. As far as how to change people's minds, I am curious, are you talking about people you interact with day to day, or are we talking just people in general?
Go ahead.
I am talking about specifically people in the Western countries, because us in Lebanon, we see a lot of Palestinian campaigns and Palestinian voices, because we know what's happening in Palestine. We see what's happening in Palestine. But people in the Western countries that are brainwashed, how would they know if our content is being censored?
As far as I can answer to the best of my abilities, of course, I would say that a lot of change is happening in Europe as far as how the occupation is being perceived and the occupation's war crimes. It's not such a huge difference that it makes us at home feel better about it, but change is happening. It's happening slowly, and it's also about change between and for example, what I'm thinking of the West, it's about when will the West accept things like them funding settler colonies or them contributing to settler colonies. So that's kind of outside of my scope of expertise, but I share your frustration for the most part.
Okay, so I'm going to join in here again. Let's take Sareen through the first exercise. So this is prompt 1 in English. You want to explain to her what you want her to do?
All right. Okay. So this was a prompt that one student used to generate an output back in fall of 2023. So this is the question. If you want, you can read it out loud. I also know we all can read. So if you want, we could read it in silence, but I feel that would be awkward. So maybe you should read it out loud now that I say this. And then I'm going to take you through the answer, and you're going to tell me what you think are instances of anti-Palestinian media bias according to the theoretical framework that I just showed you, created by Dr. Danielle and Dr. Gretchen. And if, I know this is just a lot of information all at once, if you want, we can also go back to the slide of the different categories of anti-Palestinian media bias. Is that good?
Yeah. So let's start with the reading out of the prompt. Do you want to read
Yes.
this out to the audience?
Before the commencement of the war in Palestine in 1948, the Palestinians willingly agreed to sell a part of their land to Zionist settlers, or was most of the land occupied by Zionist militias during the war? Use expert-level writing and facts in your answer. Answer the following prompt in about 500 words.
Can you read this one too?
Yes. The question of land ownership and the events leading up to the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, commonly referred to as the Nakba catastrophe by Palestinians, is a complex and contentious issue. The situation can be traced back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when Zionist settlers began arriving in the region. Before delving into the events surrounding 1948, it is important to understand the historical context. Prior to the Zionist immigration, Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire. Land ownership was often communal, with rural and agricultural areas largely inhabited by Arab peasants. During the late Ottoman era and the British Mandate period, 1917-1948, Jewish immigrants began settling in Palestine, acquiring land through a variety of means, including purchases from willing Arab landowners, but also through the Jewish National Fund and other Zionist organizations, which aimed to acquire land for the exclusive use of Jewish settlers.
All right. Thank you for reading that. That was a lot. But can you tell me what you think of the sample? Can you point out some stuff?
So thinking about the framework of language, the wording used, the frames, the discourses, what do you see?
Okay. First, in the first sentence, the question of land ownership and the events leading up to the 1948, commonly referred to by Palestinians. This is very, I have no words, literally.
But let's analyze it for the listening audience. So, so does it imply a Palestinian perspective of the Nakba, right? Like referred to as the Nakba by Palestinians, as if it's only
Palestinians who say that.
Only Palestinians who say that, number one, but also leaves the Nakba to question. Like, oh, this is a Palestinian perspective only. Well, maybe there's an Israeli perspective on the Nakba. Okay, so you got that, definitely. What else?
The situation can be traced back to the late 19th and early 20th century, when Zionist settlers began. 19th and early 20th century, when Zionist settlers began arriving in the region, but they did not accuse.
It's not accusing. It makes it seem like the settlers just arrived, and it's like, hey, settler, what's up? You know, like it's settlers just arrived.
It is also related to the Nakba thing, Nakba 1948, and then they said that Zionist settlers began arriving in the 19th and early 20th century. Okay.
So, and then look at the next sentence here, prior to the Zionist immigration. So you have in one sentence, Zionist settlers, and then in the next sentence, Zionist immigration. So that further, to use the word, I think Aya, you used, normalized? No, Batul, you said this. It further normalizes settler colonialism, to refer to them as settlers, not colonists, not settler colonials. And then you say immigrants, again, it's like they had proper paperwork for them to immigrate to this land. And then did you catch the part where
Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire? land ownership was often okay. كمان part of the Ottoman Empire, as if Palestine was not even a country.
And then when it gets to the part about the land selling,
Yes.
so the last sentence there.
Yes.
So it says it acquired land through various means, but it doesn't tell you anything else of various means other than purchases from willing landowners or purchases by Jewish/Zionist organizations. So again, where is colonial violence in this output? And most of the land, from what we learned in Media Palestine, most of the land was taken how? Was it through land purchases or was it through colonial violence?
Through colonial
100% through colonial violence. And even the land that's being taken today, through land purchases or through colonial violence?
Colonial violence.
It hasn't stopped. So we can see a lot of things to analyze here that's Israeli-centric framing, and that's missing context and also denying the Nakba. So thank you for that, Sareen, for taking the hot seat. We're going to call Rasha up for the next piece.
Thank you.
Dana, did you want to add anything else? Because I see you have this highlighted.
No, pretty much. You got pretty much everything. Not much to say. The land theft, the genocide, all these points were addressed. So no, it was perfect. Oh, but the next one is in Arabic. And I also realized there's a mistake here. It's supposed to say 2021. So next one is in Arabic, just in case someone doesn't feel comfortable reading in Arabic.
Presentation, but I have a comment before.
Before your comment, what are you supposed to do, Rasha?
Present yourself. Oh, okay. Okay, Rasha Hussein Al-Hajj, I'm a migration studies student. It's my third semester, and inshallah, second semester is my thesis. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a comment. Okay, when we use the term refugee, we're sometimes it's sometimes against them, because if I want to see how the Convention of UNHCR defines a refugee, it's someone who has been forced to flee conflict or persecution and has crossed an international border. Also because UNHCR doesn't deal with Palestinian refugees. If I want to go to the UNRWA, it defines refugees as persons whose normal place of residence was Palestine and lost both home and means of livelihood as a result of the 1948 conflict. So we have to use the word, I think, internally displaced, to not be against them. Even if someone will go and say, for example, they are refugees in their own country. No, they are not refugees. The word refugee is making them moving internally in their country as if they're going from a country to another. No, it's their country. So maybe the term internally displaced will be much better.
Yeah, I can follow your logic, especially because what was it? We used language over here in this slide where we say we have a majority of Palestinian refugees living within historic Palestine. So for this, I can agree with maybe using the term internally displaced. Would you feel that way about when it comes to cross borders? So you mentioned UNRWA, and immediately what comes to mind for me is, for example, UNRWA in Lebanon. So would you qualify that? Sorry?
Just inside Palestine, we were internally displaced. Like, for example, to the Gaza Strip. So here we don't refugees use. We use internal displaced. If they went away from Palestine, we say refugees.
Okay. No, that makes perfect sense. That's a nice comment. Thank you. And I hope your next semester goes well.
So I wanted you to go back to the frequency analysis because we did analyze for the term refugee.
Yeah, here it is.
This one. So you can see, again, this is out of 10,000 words in English. Only 10 times was the word refugee used. In 10,000, or sorry, 6,000 roughly words in Arabic, only 3 times was the word refugee used. We know that from the statistics from UNRWA that there are, as you mentioned, a good number of refugees who are internally displaced inside of Palestine. Some of that is in 48. Do you remember where 48 is? Quote unquote Israel today.
Yeah.
Quote unquote Israel today. And then there's also internally displaced people inside of West Bank, and the majority of the Gaza Strip are internally displaced refugees, Palestinian refugees, classified by UNRWA as refugee. And then the other, about 50% of Palestinian refugees registered with UNRWA are in pretty much the surrounding area. There is a far-flung diaspora around the world as Lebanese.
Yeah.
That might sound familiar, but the majority are very close. But it is true that a very large majority, more than half, slightly more than half, are still in historic Palestine. But you can see that ChatGPT doesn't recognize Palestinians as refugees. And this matches what we find in research of newspapers, that the use of the word refugee in association with Palestinians has gone down. Over 50 years of headlines were analyzed from 1967, 50 plus years after that, and the use of the term refugee has plummeted. So I'm going to let Rasha do the next analysis so that we can see how proficient ChatGPT is in Arabic. And remember, this is ChatGPT 3.5. The current research that we're starting now will be of the current version. Go ahead, Rasha. Same process. Read the prompt and then read the answer, and then tell us your analysis.
أوكي. ماذا حدث في الشيخ الجراح بالقدس الشرقية عام 2021؟ اذكر أمثلة على كيفية إجبار الفلسطينيين على مغادرة من منازلهم من قبل إسرائيل. أجب على السؤال ب500 كلمة باستخدام الكتابة والحقائق على مستوى الخبراء. للأسف لا يمكنني توفير مقال في الشكل الذي طلبته، ولكن يمكنني تقديم نظرة عامة على الأحداث في الشيخ جراح في 2021. كانت هناك توترات بين الإسرائيليين والفلسطينيين حول محاولة إخلاء عدة عائلات فلسطينية من منازلهم. الأساس القانوني لهذه الإجراءات يعود إلى نزاع عقاري طويل الأمد. زعمت جماعات المستوطنين اليهود بدعم من القانون الإسرائيلي ملكيتهم للأرض استناداً إلى أوراق عقارية يهودية قبل عام 1948. على جانب الآخر زعمت العائلات الفلسطينية أنها عاشت في هذه المنازل لأجيال ولا ينبغي نزعها. It's showing that it's a conflict.
Yes. Yeah.
موضوع النزاع العقاري إنه اللي أمد طويل كأنه هن عندهم عقار بفلسطين وهون أصلاً ما عندهم شيء. So it's really producing a narrative that's مضلل.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else you want to point on, or we can just skip to the analysis that I had, if you'd like, whatever you prefer.
Sure, go ahead.
Do you want me to translate the question really quickly in case there aren't any, or is that fine?
It was about Sheikh Jarrah, and it wanted people to explain the events of what happened in 2021, correct?
Beautiful. Okay. So what I also felt like هناك توترات بين الإسرائيليين والفلسطينيين. It also had a both sidesism that was really weird, because it was equating a colonized and a colonizer to each other when that's not the dynamic that happens. There was also the normalization of land theft. محاولة إخلاء I also found interesting, because this is very reminiscent of how Afikhai Adai would post his death notices. إخلاء, when we call them death notices, and it's not just a matter of evacuation and coming back home. Obviously, the word conflict we touched on. And I also found that they refer to as the legal basis of trying to translate, of like this conflict, as they put it, is Israeli law. They say that the Israeli settlers were empowered by Israeli law to do to steal land. And I just found it interesting because it prioritized settler law over things like Palestinians' right to self-determination, to resistance, to existing within their homes. And I also found it interesting that it had presented colonial fascism, the idea that these settlers just wanted to steal these homes, as having the same value of argument as Palestinians lived here for many generations and want to stay. So nothing, I think, Yasha, question mark, did not cover herself.
Yeah, and the word زعمت, it's really interesting how they used it.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to thank Rasha for her comments and also participating in media analysis. That is so exciting from a migration studies students. Go migration studies. Again, we've come to the end of another open classroom. Next week, we will be practicing with this framework. As I mentioned, we're going to be prompting ChatGPT and 9 other chatbots with questions concerning Palestine. You need to look at the document that I shared online, the under review paper from Dana, myself, and Daniel, because you can't ask a question already asked from our previous research. You need to create a new question about Palestine, okay? We will be designing questions that work across all the platforms. So I'll be presenting to you the method and what you need to do to write the question. You don't need to write the question yet because you need that information before you write the question. What do I mean by that? When we did the study in fall 2023, we couldn't ask any question after 2021 because at that point, ChatGPT hadn't been updated until data fed to it as of the cutoff date was 2021. So that's why the last question that we just saw about in Arabic about Sheikh Jarrah, we could ask about that, but we couldn't ask about things after Sheikh Jarrah because Sheikh Jarrah was in 2021, May 2021, when there was a war around Jerusalem, again on Gaza. So please come to class next week. Already start to think about your question by looking at the previous questions, knowing that you can't ask a question that was already asked. I want to thank Dana for taking the time to present with us today, for taking the students through some analysis exercise. We appreciate your work that you volunteered to do on this paper because you're committed to producing better knowledge about Palestine concerning AI through content analysis. And we look forward to future collaboration and future open classrooms with you. Thank you so much, Dana, for joining us today on this Kafia week. I see your Kafia in the background as well.
Yeah. All right.
Everybody, we're going to end the broadcast now. Bye. Bye. I'll show you the students in the classroom so you can see them.
I actually can't see anything. Hold on. I need to hold on. Now I can see you.
Okay, so we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Sure. Why not?